My name is Ella Winters. I'm 24 years old. 3 months ago I was the mistress of Vanderbilt Manor. Vanderbilt, the most mysterious surname in all of New York. Railroad Hunes of the Guild loves words to me at our wedding.
As your life is no longer your own.
I thought it was a romantic vow. I was wrong.
Get some rest. There's a family ceremony tomorrow.
The door clicked shut softly, but something inside me shattered. At 3 o'clock in the middle of the night, I jolt awake from an odd feeling. Not a sound, not a smell, but a shift in temperature. Mrs. Harlow? What are you doing here?
You were having a nightmare, madam. I brought you a glass of water.
I glanced at my phone. 3:15 in the morning. I hadn't been dreaming at all. She was lying. Ella, his last fiancée, moved to Europe. Have you ever met her? I thought she was jealous back then. Now that thought crawled into my mind like an insect. Why would a night troll walk into my bedroom? Why stand so close? I roll over. The moon outside Underwood Manor is always wet from look bigger and colder than anywhere else. And every day after that, Mrs. Harlow would appear beside my bed in the dead of night. The time was never the same. 2 in the morning, 3. I pretended to be asleep, and every time I was feel her gaze face a damp hand. Once like one eye opened, just flip phone, not a smartphone, and an old, untraceable model. She's getting thinner. 1 more week. She hung up, glanced at me, and left. Cold sweat broke out all over my back. The next day, I stood in front of the mirror. Only 2 weeks of the marriage, and I'd lost 12 pounds. My wedding had been custom-made, and on the big day, it had needed pins to take it in. Now it hung off me like a sack. A friend texted me saying, "Honeymoon must be brutal, huh?" I sent back a smiley face, but my fingers were shaking. I felt groggy every single day. My appetite was gone entirely, and eating made me nauseous. The housekeeper said it was adjusting to the new environment. The doctor, the Vanderbilt's family physician, of course, said it was stress. Every night at dinner, personally served my soup, and she wouldn't leave until she'd watched me take the first sip. I didn't say anything. Tidy portions of my breakfast, egg, lunch, and dinner steak, sealed them in plastic bags, and hid them in a shoes, the very back of my closet. An old shoes I'd brought from home, not one provided by the manor. I needed to get them tested.
Ella, if something ever feels wrong, come home.
I'd laughed and told him he was worrying too much. He'd known all along. Old money isn't a fairy tale. It's a hunting ground. And I was the fattest deer in the cage. 30 days into the marriage, I woke in the middle of the night to a sound Mrs. Harlow's footsteps, but her voice, speaking into her phone so low it was like a snake hadling.
She's catching on. Do it tonight.
Those fought my breath. Sleep, stabby at my bed, kept myself from trembling, and even rolled over on purpose, muttering something that sounded like sleep talk. Mrs. Harlow stood there for 3 seconds, then left the room. I waited until the footsteps down the hallway had faded completely before I dared open my eyes. Outside the window, the moon was hidden behind clouds. Everything was pitch black. I had to run. Not tomorrow, not later, right now. I slipped out of bed quietly and grabbed a black coat I'd stashed in the closet when I brought from home, not something the Vanderbilts had bought me. My sneakers were old too, with mud from Central Park still cacked onto the soles. I stuffed the sealed amoeba food to my pocket, then fished a folding knife out of the bottom drawer of Red Rennery. For protection, I thought I'd never need it. Turns out he knew old money better than I did. On my way downstairs, I avoided every security camera. Mrs. Harlow had taught me the manor's security system once. She'd said,
"Man, if there's ever a fire, you can press here to turn off the alarm."
She never thought I'd use it to escape. I pressed the button. The alarmed red light and turned green. The night in the back showed on a HUD with sear, and behind it stretched a thick forest, dark and gaping like a black mouth. I ran into it. Branches whipped my face. Stones tripped my feet. But I couldn't stop. There were no footsteps behind me, no barking dogs, no one chasing me. That was scarier than being chased. They weren't even in a hurry, because they knew. No one who'd run from this place had lived to tell the tale. The woods were darker and denser than I'd imagined. My flashlight only lit the ground 3 meters ahead. Moths danced in being along with my own terror. I fell 7 times, my knees raw and bleeding, but I didn't dare stop. My lungs felt like they were on fire. Every breath scraped my throat with the taste of rust. I don't know how long I ran. Finally, as the sky began to lighten at dawn, I saw the highway. A 2-lane asphalt road. Farm produce truck drove by, and I waved my arms like a drowning person.
"Miss, you need me to call the cops?"
"No, just take me to the nearest town, please." He gave me another long look, but didn't ask any more questions.
"Get in."
When we got to town, I found a motel, the Pine Grove Motel. The pine and neon sign was burned out. I paid for the room in cash. The old woman at the front glanced at me but said nothing. I shut the door and slid down it to the floor. My whole body was wet and cold. I turned on my call tells. No messages. The Vanderbilts hadn't come looking for me. Why not? Did they not know I'd escaped? Or did they know I'd never get away for good? I stared at the screen until tears blurred my vision. Suddenly the phone buzzed. A weather alert notification. I let out a breath, then felt absurd. I'd run for my life all night, and the rest of the world was still worrying about whether it would rain tomorrow. The next day, I took my samples to a private testing lab and paid for rush analysis. Every black Skajan that drove by made me crouch by the window, checking if it was a Lincoln Town car. I finally understood what it meant to be a hunted animal. But at least birds have wings. All I had was a folding knife, and a life I didn't know how much longer I'd get to keep. The test results came back. The fingertips hovered over the envelope for a few like I was touching a bomb. I tore it open. The conclusion was printed in bold black text on a single page. Vandismois low lays a slowly damaged mounted my liver and kidneys, all based on the dose. 4 to 6 steady use would cause flam. No gun knives, no struggle. Just at a bowl of every single day. Lintering's words over and over.
Do it tonight.
That night wasn't the start, it was the end. If I hadn't run, I'd be dead right now. It's like hit me all at once, steady well pocket. Some nights Rosamond's father instead of said, she said. Now a detail of a desk drawer before I ran. It was as a bride list. 5 women's names were on it, including mine. Next to my name, it said, at large. Next to the other 4, one name was crossed out entirely with a note in the margin. Resolved. That word turned my stomach. I ran to the bathroom, threw up, but nothing came up. I hadn't eaten quite in 2 days. I said to myself, Ella, you're not a bride anymore, you're a witness. The only one who's ever made it out alive. I hid out in that motel, too scared to use a credit card, too scared to make any call that could be traced. I bought a new payphone with cash, then typed each of the 5 mediums gouache. No news articles, no obituaries, no social media profiles. It was like they never existed at all. Vivian Cross, she'd been a moderate, famous model, married into old money 5 years prior, then vanished 6 months later. Online, people said she'd moved back to Europe, or become a nun, or lost her mind. No photos, just one 5-year-old gossip piece headlined Super Mitter's name on a sticky note and stuck it to the headboard. On the 6th day, I used a payphone to call 3 investigation rooms, and this one picked up, heard the name Vanderbilt, and hung up immediately.
Ma'am, that family is untouchable. Walk away and forget you ever heard the name. You have the wrong number.
Walk away, forget them, just like all those brides, erased and forgotten to forget one. I tried outreaching to reporters at New York Coast, making 3 seconds, said the Vanderbilt said I had a fortune for paper for every year. You're barking up the wrong tree. I hung up, huddled inside the phone booth with my knees pulled to my chest. I had a photo of that bride list on my phone, 5 names, 4 endings. It hit me then. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. They had an entire web, tight and unbreakable, and I was the only fish that had ever swum out of it. But how long can a fish survive out of water? I stared at the mildew on the motel ceiling, and by the time I counted the 70-second spot, my phone rang. Before that moment, said, Ellie Winters? How did you know I was looking for you? I've been monitoring the Vanderbilt family's networks. Someone searched my name, and the IP address traces right back to this Pine Grove motel. In all of New York, only one person would be desperate enough to do that. I saw the news about your escape. No, they didn't report it, but I have a source inside the police. They said a bride ran away, and the manor is in complete chaos, just like me. We agreed to meet at an abandoned gas station 3 towns away. I chose daytime, tucked a folding knife into my boot, arrived half an hour early, and hid in the trees across the street to watch. She carried no bag, no phone, nothing in her hands. Did you get the evidence? I handed her the test report and the photos of the bride list. She finished reading. Her hands were shaking, but her face showed no expression. These are not enough. What do we need? We need video or audio of Mrs. Harlow admitting to poisoning. We need Ella's financial records to prove he's using marriage for fraud, and we need testimony from other victims. They can afford the best lawyers in the country. You have to give them something they can't refute. I asked her how she knew all this so clearly. She smiled bitterly, her eyes looking out at the distant fields. Because I tried to call the police. They went to the Vanderbilt estate. Mrs. Harlow served them tea, and Alexander smiled and said she's mentally ill. After left, they locked me up for a month. Later, I climbed out of the basement window and lost 40 pounds. She rolled up her sleeve. There was a scar on the inside of her forearm, winding like a centipede. This is what's left when the needle broke off inside me when they gave me a sedative. I looked at the scar and said nothing. Sometimes silence is heavier than any words. It has everything I've collected over the years, plus a map of the manor's secret tunnels. That's how I got out back then. After I escaped, I worked as an assistant to a private investigator and how to dig up dirt, how to gather evidence. I've been investigating the Vanderbilts in all these years, not for revenge. I just wanted to know how many more there were like me. I also have a source, a maid who quit the manor. She worked the Vanderbilt for 15 years, knows all their secrets. She told me about the tunnels, about Mrs. Harlow's routine. Every week Mrs. Harlow goes to that little chapel behind the manor. No phone, no guard, just half an hour alone. Going to confession? Maybe confession, maybe something else. But it's the only place with no cameras. Why are you helping me? She was silent for a long time, so long I thought she would answer. Because of Rachel. The first one on your list, the one who died of illness. I induced her to them. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know it would end like that. I thought it was just scam, marry them, steal a few million, get divorced. I had no idea they killed people. By the time I figured it out, she was already gone. The obituary said stepsis. I went to her funeral. The cask was closed. I asked if I could see her one last time. They said her body was too badly disfigured. I can't let her death be for nothing. That night, back at the motel, I spread the tunnel map out on my bed. The entrance was in an abandoned well behind the manor, running through the wine cellar and straight Mrs. Harlow's office. I stared at that red line on the map and didn't sleep a wink all night. The night wind in the Hudson Valley cut straight to the bone. I wore a Bless quarter had disguised as lipstick strapped to my wrist. Vivian drove me to the edge of the woods and turned off the headlight. Take you. She pointed ahead. Follow the crew 20 minutes and you'll see his house. It's an old pump station. The well is inside. I got out of the truck. Muddy leaves crunched softly under my shoes. The headlights went out behind me and the whole world went dark. I turned on my flashlight and picked my way forward. That 20-minute walk felt like a lifetime. I kept looking over my shoulder, convinced someone was following me. Half the roof caved in, and there was nothing but wind in the trees. The well was in the center of the room, covered by a rusted iron plate. Vivian had said there was a metal ladder under the plate leading down to the bottom, and a hidden door in the side wall that opened into the manor's wine cellar. It took all my strength to move the iron plate. The shriek of metal cut through the silence loud as a wounded animal.
I shone my was rusted through. The well was drawn one rung with my foot. It wobbled but didn't break. I took a deep breath and started climbing down. The bottom of the well was narrow, barely enough room to turn around. The air smelled like damp rust and rotting wood. I felt around the stone wall until my hand found an iron chain, the handle for the hidden door, just like Vivian said. I pulled harder and the slab fell open with a dull thud, revealing a low, camp tunnel. I hunched over and crawled inside. My knees scraped against loose rock. I held the flashlight between my teeth. After about 10 meters, light filtered down from above. A vent grate for the wine castle. I pushed the grate aside and dropped down. I landed on a stack of empty oak barrels. It was the Vanderbilt Manor wine cellar. I recognized the labels: Latour, Margay, Romanée Cantine. A single bottle of that stuff could keep a regular person afloat for 6 months. And I probably only had tonight. I hid behind a stack of barrels and turned on the signal hammer. It hummed softly. Every camera within 50 meters would go to static. Then I climbed the stairs up to the main floor. The hallway was empty, 2 in the morning, and the whole manor was asleep. At the end of the east wing was the door to Mrs. Harlow's office, with a keypad lock. I'd seen it in Vivian's files. The code was 0917, Alexander's mother's birthday. She'd been one of the vanished brides, too, just from an earlier generation, so old she didn't even make the list. I typed in the numbers. The light turned green. The door clicked open softly. Mrs. Harrow's office looked like an archive. The walls were lined with keys labeled East Wing, West Weinstein Keller. Stacks folders covered the desk. An old computer cornet screen still on, showing all static where my jammers was working, of course. I put on gloves and started going through the drawers. First drawer, Saxon Tenel files. Families and trusts, offshore accounts, charitable foundations. Third drawer, locked. I picked the lock with a paperclip. Vivian had taught me the basics. I'd practiced for 2 straight days, cut my hand 3 times. Inside the drawer was a thick binder. The cover read, Bride Files. I opened it. 6 separate files, 1 for each woman. My name was on the first one. It had my full background check, cover details of my pre-credit agreement, and a handcake every drugs did my physical actions. 30 days of meticulous notes. Estimated complete date, November 15th. In red was the night Mrs. Harlow had said to tonight would have been the day I died of illness. The other files were similar, but some were already closed. Accidental fall 3 years prior. The file said she'd been mentally unstable and on long-term medication. Emily Parker died of illness 5 years prior, cause listed as multiple organ failure. I took in her photos of a single page with my phone. My hands shook, but I kept pressing the shutter. These pieces of paper were the only headstones they ever got. I was on the 3rd file when I heard footsteps outside the door. I quickly turned off my phone and squeezed under the desk. Footsteps got closer, then stopped. The doorknob turned, no beep of a keypad. Mrs. Harlow had a key. She stepped inside, didn't turn on the window, and I could see her slippers. She walked straight to the desk and pulled open the drawer, the one I'd picked. I held my breath. From under the desk, I could see the profile of her face. She pulled out a file and stood there for a moment. Then she sighed. It was a soft sigh. It wasn't tiredness. It was resignation. Like someone doing something she hated but couldn't stop doing. She turned and left. The door clicked shut behind her. I waited a few minutes, sure the hallway was empty, before crawling out from under the desk. My back was soaked with cold sweat. My gloves were damp inside. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it, closed the drawer, and slipped out of the office. I went back the way I came. Hallway, stairs, wine cellar, well. By the time I climbed back out of the stone house, gasping for air. Morning light filtered through the broken roof and fell on my face. I looked down at the recorder on my wrist, was still blinking, had captured every sound of Mrs. Harlow coming in. But she'd only made one sound, a sigh. Would a sigh hold up as evidence? Not even close. I needed her to say the words out loud. I lay there I thought of Rachel's and Emily's wedding photo, the scar on Vivian's arm. I couldn't stop now. Back at Vivian's place, she looked at the photos I'd taken. Her hands clenched into fists.
Ella, you almost ended up dead in that binder. No, I said. I almost became a name in that binder.
She asked if I'd gotten any of Mrs. Harlow's conversations on tape.
Just a sigh.
She was quiet for a long time. We need her confession. She goes to that little chapel behind the manor every week. No cameras. We can bug the place.
How do you know she goes there?
I staked it out for 3 months. No set day. She goes randomly. We'll have to camp out and wait. For the next 3 weeks, Vivian and I took turns staking out the chapel from an abandoned farmhouse across the way. During the day, she watched through binoculars. At night, I monitored the bug. We survived on energy bars. On the 22nd night, sound finally came through the receiver. A car engine, a door opening, footsteps echoing on stone floors. Lord, I've killed another one. My heart seized. I didn't push Rachel, but I held the ladder. I didn't force the medicine on Emily, but I made the soup. I remember all their names. I know where all their bones are buried. Silent tears, but you could hear it in her breathing. Her shoulders ragged, braced, and broken like a machine falling apart. 10 minutes later, she stood up, dried her eyes, and left. I sat there staring at the receiver, my whole body trembling. Vivian wrapped her arms around me from behind. She was warm. Neither of us said a word. But I knew in that moment, we weren't fighting for ourselves anymore. We were speaking for all the women who never got to. The next day, Vivian put me in touch with the only lawyer she trusted, a retired federal prosecutor in Galtstein. Martin was in his 70s with a full head of white hair and eyes sharp as a scalpel. Hanging in his office was of him with Justice Ginsburg. He read through my evidence and said 10 full minutes.
Do you have any idea how deep the Vanderbilt's connections run in New York?
I know.
Their legal team includes a former deputy attorney general. Their friends include sitting senators. They have enough money to buy a small country. Are you still willing to take this on?
I looked him right in the eye. If they timed out my name, we'll have resolved written next to it. Martin sighed and took off his glasses to polish them.
Been retired 7 years. 7 years, and no one's brought me a case worth fighting.
He took the case. He helped me organize all the evidence into a criminal complaint to the New York State Attorney General's office. At the same time, I sent an anonymous package to Sarah Brennan, an investigative reporter at the New York Times. No name attached, just the Vanderbilt's bride list and the audio of Miss Harlow Chapel confession. A week later, the New York Times ran the full investigation on the front page. The article laid out the full criminal scheme, how the Vanderbilt brides posed women's married for their online, and it got over 100 million hits overnight. The New York State Attorney General announced a special task force. State troopers raided Vanderbilt Manor. I watched on TV as reporters stood in front of the manor's iron gates, police lights flashing behind them. In that moment, I finally cried. Alexander Vanderbilt was arrested on 11 felony counts, including murder, conspiracy, and fraud. I saw footage her being led out of the manor, still in her black suit, hair perfectly coated, face as calm as if she were to a luncheon.
Mrs. Harlow, do you have anything to say to the brides of the harmed?
Hear that car door slam all the way from my motel room thousands of miles away.
We're free. Not yet. Freedom is what they got. Our job is to make sure they get justice.
The trial lasted 3 months.
Alexander's legal team was formidable. 2 lawyers, all Ivy League, all in $3,000 suits.
Mrs. Harlow claiming she'd acted alone and the family had no idea.
I didn't push Rachel, but I held the ladder.
The prosecution offers Mrs. Harlow a deal to testify as a state's witness.
She said, I've spent my whole life taking orders. I'm done. He handed me a cup, went black. I woke up locked in the basement wine cellar. He said I was mentally unwell and needed rest, but really just waiting for the attention to die down.
You had massive gambling debts, isn't that right?
Yes.
And Alexander Vanderbilt paid those debts off for you, correct?
Yes.
And in exchange, you introduced him to his next bride. Isn't that true?
I sat there, cold all over.
Vivian was kept on the stand for further testimony.
She admitted she'd owed huge gambling debts, and Alexander had offered to pay them off if she induced him to suitable brides. She said she had no idea he'd kill them. She thought it was just a marriage scam. By the time she realized people dying, she ran.
The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Reporters typed furiously on their laptops.
I sat there staring at Vivian's back. Her shoulders were slightly. My closest ally had been part of the scheme, and one of the women she'd introduced was Rachel. The trial dragged on in chaos. In the end, the prosecution ruled Vivian hadn't admitted a crime. Her involvement had ended before the murders happened, and she'd provided critical evidence to take the family down. But the news of her deal with Alexander broke to the public, and people were furious. When she left the courthouse, reporters swarmed her. Do you regret you did? She didn't answer. She just got in a taxi and left. I stood far back and watched her car disappear around the corner. Reporters swarmed me too. Ella, will you still work with Vivian? I said, no. They pressed me for why. I didn't answer. That night, Vivian sent me a text. Ella, I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time and didn't reply. It wasn't that I couldn't forgive her. I just didn't know what to say. She'd helped me save who knows how many future brides, but she'd also been part of what got Rachel killed once at once. In the end, Alexander's lawyers used family ligish bride too, and his father had raised and see women as disposable tools. The jury heard all of it, but the verdict was still the same. Guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder, guilty on 3 counts of conspiracy murder on all fraud charters.
Sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
When the verdict was read, Alexander didn't look at anyone. He just stared at the ceiling like he was counting the cracks. After the verdict, the bailiff led Alexander away. As he passed me, he suddenly turned his head to look at me. His lips moved like he was about to say something. But in the end, he just closed his eyes for a second and was led away. Outside, the sun was blinding. Reporters swarmed with microphones and cameras. Vivian wasn't there. She'd left early.
Ella, you did something incredible.
The brides who died are the ones who did something credible. I just survived. Back at my apartment, I shut the door and slid down it to the floor. I'd won. But winning didn't feel like joy.
It felt like empty space. Those women weren't coming back, no matter the verdict. Rachel's mother would still grieve. Emily's little sister would still remember her in her wedding dress. And I would never forget that shadow over my bed at 3 in no one. Curtains always drawn, food left at the door. Vivian called over and over. I never answered. I wasn't angry at her. I was angry at the whole world. Why did they die and I got to live? Why was I supposed to feel grateful for surviving? My therapist told me later it was called survivor's guilt. I told her I didn't need a name for it. I needed answers. She said I'd have to find them myself. A month later, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Vivian. She was holding a potter's plant, her eyes red and puffy. She stood on the doorstep, didn't step inside. I'm not here to beg for forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you I changed my daughter's name to Hope. She doesn't know about my past, but I wanted her and her mom did wrong things, and right things too. She set the potters down on the doormat. This is for you. Potters are hard to kill, just like you. Then she turned and walked away, stood there staring at the plant. And suddenly I thought, maybe just being alive is meaning enough. That night, I texted Vivian back. She wrote back one word, okay. Martin helped me recover my assets from the Vanderbilt state, and I got back what was mine before the marriage. Not a fortune, but enough to start over. I moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn, not far from Prospect Park. All the green outside the window made me feel safe. I saw my therapist once a week, working through the PTD. 6 months later, I got a letter. It was from Mrs. Harlow, sent from prison. Her handwriting was neat and precise, just she was.
Now I'm in prison, and every morning I wake up what would have been like if Heifer walked in soon. I'm innocent.
I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I never wrote back. It wasn't that I couldn't forgive her. I just didn't know what to say. Some debts can't be paid off with an apology. I tried looking for a job, but Vanderbilt on my resume was like a brand. No one wanted to hire a woman who'd taken on old money and won. I thought about changing my name, but I didn't. I was done running. One day I was walking around Brooklyn and saw a small store for rent. It had been a sticker so still clung to the floor. I stood there in front of the door and suddenly not open on my own place. Not a flower shop, a used bookstore. Quiet, no fighting, no scrambling. I rented the space. Renovations were simple. Fresh white paint, new light bookshelves from the flea market. On opening day, there was no ribbon cutting, no flowers baskets, just me and a room of old books. Sunlight streamed in, dust mote slowly floating in the beams. It was quiet. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. A woman walked in the door. She was in her 30s, wearing an expensive coat, but you couldn't miss the bruise on her face.
Are you Ella Winters? Who sent you? Vivian. She said you could help me.
Her name was Catherine. She was married to a hedge fund manager. She said her husband gave her sleepy, losing her hair, forgetting things. She'd seen the New Times story online and tracked down Vivian. I looked into her eyes, looked scared, lost, but with that little spark of fight left.
It's okay. Tell me everything.
That night, I locked up the bookstore and called Martin. Martin, I need to help someone.
Who?
The next bride.
Talk about your plan.
Catherine was the first person helped by the Bride Project. No hotline, no official nonprofit, just me, Martin, Vivian, who funded it, and the back room of a used store. We helped her gather evidence, find a lawyer, get a restraining order. 3 months later, her husband was arrested. I nodded. It wasn't for her. It was for Rachel. Catherine's case made the news. Then the calls started coming.
My husband's drugging me too. I don't buy it.
Am I on a list? Please tell me if I'm on a list.
I didn't have a list. That bride list had been the Vanderbilt's private document. But I knew they weren't the only family like that. I turned the back room of the bookstore into an office, bought a used phone, and started running a hotline. Vivian sent an anonymous check every month. I never sent them back. We needed the money. Martin came in twice a week, pro bono. We helped one woman, then 12, then 27, then 83. The Bride Project had no official office, no website, just an address, a used bookstore on a street in Brooklyn. But every wealthy wife in New York dealing with abuse knew where to find us. Because it wasn't just a bookstore. It was a way out. Alexander's lawyers appealed for a new trial. They proved he'd been in civil state during the crimes. I testified again. In court, Alexander looked 10 years older. His hair was fully white, his eyes vacant.
His lawyer presented a report about how his father forced him to be part of the abused him accident. He's a victim, the lawyer said.
The prosecutor asked if I wanted to speak. He was a victim, but Rachel wasn't, Emily wasn't. They never hurt him. They just wanted a home. Trauma isn't a license to kill. If he'd been in that pain, he could have stopped. He didn't. He kept going until he got caught.
Someone in the gallery clapped. The judge banged his gavel. The appeal was denied.
My mother's name was Eileen. She died of illness, too.
I froze. Back at the bookstore, I looked up Eileen Vanderbilt. Obituary 1973, died of sepsis, 31 years old. The same age I'd been when I ran. I sat behind the counter, staring at that obituary until it got dark. He'd grown up inside that same trap, but he'd chosen to become the hunter. And I'd chosen to dig graves for hunters like him. Mrs. Harlow died of cancer in prison. Her son used the money she left to start a foundation for women escaping domestic abuse. He wrote in a letter, "My mom owed a debt. I'll spend the rest of my life paying it." I never wrote back, but I added his foundation to the Bride Project's list of donors. Vivian's daughter, Hope, got into law school. She emailed me, "Aunt Ella, I want to study family law. I want to help you." I wrote back, "Not help me, help them." The summer she interned in New York, she stayed in the apartment above my bookstore. "Do you hate my mom?" One night she asked me. I thought about it for a long time. No. But it took me a lot of years to get there. Why? Because hating someone is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. I don't want to be poisoned anymore. She nodded. The next day she called Vivian. I don't know what they talked about, but Vivian texted me later. I wrote back. Her name is Hope, not Hate. We hired our first full-time employee, Sarah, Rachel's little sister. She quit her accounting job to run our operations. My sister did in small office in Midtown Manhattan. The sign on the door, The Bride Project, in small, quiet letters. That same year, we got a call we never expected.
This is Detective Daniel Chen. Remember me?
I remembered. He'd been my security detail during the trial. Quiet, Chinese-American, sharp. I remember. What's going on?
Alexander's cousin, the Vanderbilt side of the family, just registered a new matchmaking company in Las Vegas. I think they're running the same playbook.
My stomach dropped. Do you have proof?
Not yet, but I need your help.
I hung up and looked at the wall in our office. 83 poachers, 83 women who'd survived. But I knew there were so many more who hadn't made it out. I grabbed my coat and walked out the door. This wasn't the end. It was a new fight. Daniel took me to meet a source, a secretary who'd worked for Alexander's cousin's company. Her name was Lena. 30 me make tea for the brides. Every time I finished, my boss would add a white packet. I asked what it was. He said vitamins. Did you believe him? No. But I was too stressed. Lena gave us a list. 7 names, all who'd married into that side of the family in the last year. 3 had already died in accidents. 2 were still under observation. I stared at that list, my fingers shaking. Not scared. Angry. Same scheme, same ploy, disappearance. That hell never went away. It just moved to a new address. We're going to stop them.
This time is different. Time we have the Bride Project. We have the press. We have people on our side.
And me. Vivian's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in a black trench coat, her hair shorter than ever. What are you doing here? Daniel told me. She walked in, glanced at the list. I owe Rachel. It's time I paid her back. After Mark Vanderbilt, Alexander's cousin, was arrested, I thought it was over. But when police searched his estate, they found a locked room in the basement.
No bride files inside, no poison. Just a wall covered in photos of me. From the day I ran out of the woods,
to opening the bookstore, to running the hotline, to testifying in court, every single one clear as day. The most recent were from the week before. Someone had been watching me for decades. Detective Daniel Chan looked at the photos, his face grim.
Mark didn't take these. He only got out of prison 3 years ago. These span way too long.
Harlow. I stared at the surveillance log in the corner. The last page had a name scrolled on it. H. Harlow. Mrs. Harlow, she was dead. But her work never stopped. I went through every letter and visitation record from Mrs. Harlow's time in prison. A few months before she died, a man had visited, signed in as John Smith. But in the security footage, he was wearing a 3-piece suit with the Vanderbilt family signet ring on his finger. I sent the screenshot to Sarah at the New York Times. She dug into it for days. And when she called back, her voice was shaking.
That's Philip Vanderbilt.
Alexander's uncle. He moved to Switzerland decades ago. Everyone thought he was dead. He's not dead. He runs an offshore company in Geneva. He provides marriage management services for wealthy families all over the world. Marriage management. Marriage management.
Philip was far smarter than his nephews. He never showed his face. Everything ran through 3 layers of shell companies and a team of lawyers, doctors, and private investigators. Vivian, even though we'd been distant, called me out of the blue.
I know someone who used to work for Philip's company. She'll testify, but only if we can keep her safe. I asked who it was. Vivian was quiet for a few seconds. My daughter. Hope. You let Hope go on undercover? She insisted. Said her grandma owed a debt, and she wanted to pay it back. I hung up and called Hope right away. You're insane! Maybe. But I don't want my mom and grandma to carry that guilt forever. Hope's voice steady. And I realized this girl was braver than me. Hope got a job at Philip's company as a financial analyst. She stayed in Geneva for months, sending me encrypted messages every week. One day, she sent over a file, Philip's client list, 17 names from 6 countries, all wealthy ears. Next to every name, a bride status. My name was on there too. Status, processed, survived, under surveillance. I stared at it for a long time. Then I noticed the last name, Grace McCormick. Status, at large, unresolved. Grace, another survivor just like me. And she was still alive. He ran her through federal databases and found she'd changed her name years ago and moved to a retirement community in Florida. I flew down overnight. Grace was old now, in a wheelchair, but her eyes were still sharp as knives. She looked at my ID and was quiet for a long time. I've been waiting for you. You knew I was looking for you? I knew you were fighting. I keep scraps every article about you. She opened her nightstand and it was full of neatly stacked clippings about the Bride Project, hundreds of them. Why didn't you ever come forward? She looked down. I was scared. When I ran, they killed my dog, left a note. My mom's gone now, but I'm still scared. Grace gave me a handwritten list. She'd stolen it from Philip's office decades ago. 12 names on it, 7 I'd never heard of. What happened to them? Grace stared out the window. Dead. All of them. I was the only one who got out. It felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. 12 brides, only 2 survived. Me and Grace. And Philip was still in Switzerland drinking wine, running his marriage management business. That night, I sat on my hotel bed staring at the list. A thought crept in like a snake. If I hadn't run, my name would be on that paper too. Crossed out. Marked. Resolved. I decided we weren't just going to help survivors anymore. We were going to put Philip Vanderbilt on trial.
He's in Switzerland. We don't have an extradition treat for this.
Martin, old now, very old, adjusted his glasses.
Then we'll make him come to us. A sting.
We set a trap. They took the bait. Months later,
Philip's lawyers arranged for Ella to meet Philip in person in New York. The meeting was at a private club in Manhattan. I sat in a car across the street, my palms the sweating. Philip was older than I'd pictured. His hair was dyed jet black, his suit sharp as a knife. He looked like a wax figure.
I hear you're looking for a partner. The Vanderbilt family would be happy to provide our services.
Ella followed the plan, acting interested in a long-distance fiancé they'd proposed. Philip handed her a contract for matchmaking services, but giving the spouse full say over her care in case of emergency. Philip handed her a contract for matchmaking services, but buried in the fine print a medical power of attorney, giving the spouse full say over her care in case of emergency. But as Ella left the club, Philip suddenly glanced out the window, right at my car. That smile sent a chill down my spine.
You think you're in control?
Philip didn't run. The next day, his lawyer showed up at federal court and asked to meet with the prosecution. I sat in the gallery and watched Philip walk into court, steady as anything.
I've long admired the Bride Project and Miss Ella Winters. I'm willing to cooperate with the investigation, but I demand to speak with Miss Winters in person.
The judge looked at me. I agree. In the judge's chamber, for me like a kind old grandfather.
You're very good, but you can't save everyone. You know why? You have one fatal flaw.
I stared at him. What's that?
You only save women, but my clients never get their hands dirty. They hire women. Housekeepers, nurses, secretaries. As long as there are women willing to hurt other women for money, your project will never win.
Philip's words cut like a knife, and I knew he was right. Mrs. Harlow had been a woman. Vivian had been an accomplice once. The hands that made the suit, held the ladders, wrote the list. They weren't all men's hands. Commit fraud, but the extradition fight dragged on for years. Meanwhile, his company's business kept going all over the world. We got word that a group called the Swan Project was copying the Vanderbilt playbook in Europe, even more discreetly. Their client list included royalty, politicians, tech billionaires. And Philip sent me a letter from prison.
I lost, but the business model won. Tell me, whose bedside is the next Mrs. Harlow standing at right now?
I folded the letter and put it in my pocket.
Ella, there's a weird case. A man called, said his sister married to a British aristocratic family. She's sleeping loon all the time, says the housekeeper brings her tea every night.
My blood went cold. Not the Vanderbilts, a copycat.
Interpol won't open a case.
Then we'll find the evidence. Hope and I, Vivian's granddaughter, flew to London. We posed as reporters from a gardening magazine and got out inside the estate. The garden is beautiful. But the housekeeper had the exact same look in her eyes that Mrs. Harlan had had all those years ago. The same tea, the same butler, the same routine, completely copied across the sea.
We spent weeks gathering evidence inside that estate. Hope learned every trick Vivian had taught me, picking locks, planting bugs, avoiding cameras. One night she snuck into the housekeeper of their bride list. It was the exact same spreadsheet to the Vanderbilts, just with a different letterhead. The Swan Project. We brought the evidence to Scotland Yard. They arrested the housekeeper and the lord of the manor. But the aristocrat skipped bail and fled to a country with no extradition treaty.
We saved his wife, a woman named Emily. She cried and held on to me. I thought I was the only one. You're not alone. You never will be. Back in New York, I got word that Philip had died in prison. His lawyer said his last words were, "Tell Ella Winters the game isn't over."